Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order, and the first order of business is if there are any public comments. Doug?
No, sir. No public speakers today.
Okay. Then the next order of business is approval of minutes of the June 27th meeting. Motion, please. All in favor? Opposed? Minutes approved. Committee work plan?
There.
It says you adjourned the last meeting. I do want to change that to Jim Sidor, who's...
Yes. Okay, so you get noted?
Yeah.
Doug, please.
I read the minutes.
That's so Jim could get paid. And I don't get paid. There's a corollary to that one. Okay. I'm sorry. Next thing is the work plan. Is there any change?
No changes.
No changes in the work plan. And then we have, next thing, there is no budget watch this month because we do that at the board meeting this month.
That's correct.
So the next thing would be the finance watch. Pat?
Okay, thank you. Finance Watch appears on Roman numeral 4-1 of your committee book this morning. We have a transaction to report on. This is the Transportation Revenue Bonds 2011A. This is a $400 million issuance of bonds to finance existing approved transportation and transit and commuter projects. The transaction was led by Bank of America Merrill Lynch together with Loop Capital Markets. We had a retail order period on Monday the 11th where we offered about 200 million bonds, and we had a significant oversubscription, over interest in those bonds. The following day, we had strong institutional interest, and that's all described here in the write-up. I won't go into great detail. I will say this was a very good transaction. In total, we had $1.3 billion in institutional orders for the bonds. It enabled us to reprice at very aggressive levels, which compared not only to prior transactions but other transactions in the market reflected very tight pricing to the MTA. If you turn to Roman numeral 4-2, you see the transaction highlights there. A all-in TIC of 4.95%. What's unique about this transaction, there are a few unique features about it. One is we were able to issue 35-year bonds for the first time with the consent of the state comptroller in their review of the deal, and that was for projects identified specifically for 2nd Avenue Subway, the very long live projects that are currently underway there. Secondly, we did have some interest in insured bonds, and so we did use assured guarantee for 2 maturities. Lastly, we had 2 maturities where we had a reverse inquiry from an institutional investor that came to us and said they would like a 5-year par call rather than our 10-year standard par call on 2 maturities. They were willing to come in at a very aggressive level for those maturities. What you see on the next page is the aggregate debt service for all of the transportation revenue bonds together with the specifics of this deal. Happy to take any questions on this.
Just, did you have? Can you elaborate a little bit on that reverse inquiry and the par call and how you view that?
Sure. Well, you know, the baseline when we go into these transactions is to look at a structure that has a 10-year par call. That's the bulk of our fixed rate bonds. Are issued with that standard 10-year par call. We had one particular investor contacted the book running manager and said, you know, for whatever reason, their own portfolio views and so forth, they wanted to see bonds in kind of the difficult part of the curve in the 20, 23, 24, 25 range that would have a 5-year par call rather than the standard 10-year par call. Well, typically we would have to pay a higher yield to offer that 5-year par call. In this case, because of that strong interest on the part of the investor, there wasn't what I would say we didn't have to pay nearly as much for that, and we evaluated it at the time against the 10-year par call that was currently structured. Came out to be a better result, and we ended up we did it for those two maturities.
Anything else?
Just in terms of the second part of this transaction that is yet to be completed is a $100 million variable rate issuance that we're currently still negotiating with Bank of America Merrill Lynch on, and this is a letter of credit that will we expect to come to completion with the bank in the coming 4 to 6 weeks, and we would issue those variable rate bonds. This was all approved by the board when we approved the total transaction. So.
You might mention Fitch rating. Fitch.
Oh, on the DT, yeah. We are working on also a remarketing of some dedicated tax fund variable rate bonds. There's a fair amount of activity. So that the dedicated tax fund variable rate bonds 2008B, we recently just heard from Fitch Ratings that they took that credit off of negative outlook and moved it to stable. And we're still waiting for additional commentary and color from Fitch on that action. But I think certainly the completion of the state budget this year was a factor in their decision, and we'll apprise the committee when we have more detail on that action.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay.
Okay, next moving to MTA headquarters and all agency items. We had 2 reports and information items. The first.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't mean to monopolize. You didn't see me, that's why. Being as we're going to be going into the budget season here and various decisions to be made on capital strategies, I think it might be helpful if the board, if this committee, I should say, received copies of the major rating agency, the current major rating agency write-ups, just so that we have that as kind of a benchmark to look at, if it's not too inconvenient.
That'll be no problem. We'll make sure we get those to you.
I mean, electronically is fine.
Okay. Yeah, so the first report and information item within MTA headquarters is a list of fees and assessments. What happened last month was Board Member Mitchell Pally had asked about fees that we pay to New York State. So what we did is we compiled a list, which you can find on page Roman numeral 5-1, and these are 3 major fees that we pay every year to New York State. And I put some, I don't know. It sort of is what it is.
I reiterate my question as to how will we deliver this information and to whom. It's startling when you read it and think about it. It's just a ripple. Okay. I'd like to do something with the numbers.
Okay.
I will call up my local representative. Okay. Thank you.
Also, for your information, I believe you received draft copies of the MTA financial statements for the first 3 months ended March 2011, and they will be discussed and discussed at the audit committee this afternoon.
Got him. We got him.
Okay. We have 5 competitive procurements for headquarters for a grand total of $246,920. And 1 ratification of a completed procurement for $55 million.
May we have a motion, please?
Motion made.
And a second? All in favor?
Got a quick question on the onboard bus hardware system. Number 5?
Yeah.
Or that's the ratification, sorry.
He's doing it.
Did we just
The
do the
ratification.
ratification?
We did them all.
That's fine. Just ask a question
Sure.
on it. This was done pursuant to an RFP, is that right? I read that there's 5, I think you say here that the other 4 companies have been deemed technically qualified, and as they become available, we could use them?
Charlie,
Hey,
Monahan
Charlie.
is here.
Yeah, I'll
Sorry
answer
about
that. That's correct, Jeff. We have awarded the contract for Staten Island to Verifone. As a result of the proposals we received, we've deemed other suppliers to be technically qualified, and we will compete among the technically qualified suppliers for the equipment in other boroughs going forward.
Did they compete for Staten Island?
They did compete for Staten Island,
Okay.
and they were not successful.
So and the other batches, are you doing it by borough? Is that how you're rolling it out?
That's our thought at this point, yes.
And out of curiosity, why Staten Island first?
Staten Island is first because we thought it would be a good place to do this, and because they're so dependent on bus service as opposed to subway service, it just seemed like it's also relatively small in the grand scheme of things, roughly 800 buses as opposed to 1,000 or more, and so it seemed like a good place where we could get more experience with this.
And is the technology for each one of these, presumably they're different companies, right? I mean,
Yes.
they're interchangeable?
Yes, because we're relying on open standards and financials. First of all, because we have specified open standards for the real-time bus information equipment, and second, because all of these will ultimately be used for fare collection, and we are relying on financial industry standards for that as well. These are all expected to be interchangeable.
I just wanted to say what a great thing this is. And I'm glad that it's happening in New York City finally. It's happened, obviously, all over the world. It happens across the Hudson in New Jersey. We really should have been at Smart Card a long time ago. Obviously, it does have to be interchangeable between the boroughs because Staten Islanders do travel to Brooklyn and Queens. So, this can't happen fast enough, and I'm glad to see that it's happening now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jim, I agree with everything Andrew just said.
That's the second time?
Oh, yeah.
That's scary.
What is the expected rollout for the other boroughs, or let's say the last borough?
I would have thought sometime early in 2013.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move to the Metro North and Long Island Railroad agenda. There is one walk.
Yes. Yes, we did. And then there was a question after we voted, actually.
We have a walk-in action item for Metro North. What they want to do is hold public hearings to have a fare increase on the New Haven line in the state of Connecticut. That's an action item.
That's for travel solely in the state of Connecticut?
It's for travel with also, I believe, between New York and Connecticut as well. Yes.
Okay, so
15%.
we have everybody have the memorandum, so we need a motion, please. So moved. Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the action items passed.
Okay. Moving to procurements, there are 5 procurements for Metro North and Long Island Railroad for a grand total of $125,879,906. I'm going to go through them individually. For Metro North, there's one non-competitive procurement with CDOT for $84,625,000. That's for the M8 fleet, and the Metro North share of that contract is $29,525,250.
Motion made.
Don't you want to take them all together, or you?
We could do that, sure.
Yeah, take
Okay.
them all together.
There's also one competitive multi-agency procurement with Long Island Railroad and New York City Transit for $1,386,000. And then we have for Long Island Railroad, they're the lead agency on 3 procurements. One multi-agency non-competitive procurement with Metro North and New York City Transit for $29,500,000. One modification of a competitive procurement managed by MTA Capital Construction for $9,344,286, and one modification to a competitive procurement for $1,024,620.
Jim, these were all brought up in the committee. Mitch, everything was approved in the
Yes.
Railroad Committee?
Yes, they were.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mitch,
Yes.
I'm really happy to see this New Haven line equipment purchase,
Yes.
since those are the oldest MTA cars in existence on any MTA facility. When are you anticipating that all of the M2s, 4s, and 6s would be retired with this procurement?
The information was, I believe, starting in 2014, all of the cars would start to be eliminated, all the old cars would start to be eliminated based upon the current contract and this option for the additional cars,
Thank you.
if they're on time, which Charles clearly points out, if they're on time.
But the next shipment of these, since the first shipment was delayed and got all the kinks worked out, should be a little better, correct?
We would hope.
Okay.
And I'm sure the riders on the New Haven line also hope. Yes. Because the more of these we get before the winter, the better the New Haven line will be. Yes.
And the summer.
And the summer.
Okay, so a motion, please? Yeah, Carl.
It's just for the record, I'm abstaining from any voting today.
Okay. Will you note that, Doug?
Yes.
By the way, I think it's fitting that we welcome Carl back from a very difficult medical situation. Carl, it's really good to have you back. You're a good friend and an important member of the board, and welcome, and we look forward to working with you all, with you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back. And stay well. I
Yes.
agree. So now we have the procurements. We need a motion, please, for them. A second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Metronauts, go ahead.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have MTA bus operations. There are two procurements, one non-competitive for MTA Bus Company for $835,538, and one competitive for New York City Transit for an amount to be determined.
Okay, motion, please. Second? All in favor? Opposed? So moved.
Can I just one, I assume on 7-3 in the discussion, it says in June 2010, it says the New York State Assembly. I assume that means New York State Legislature. Because if only the Assembly passed it, it wouldn't be law.
Okay.
I assume that's what that means. I'm just.
Okay, so let's not, Doug, will you check?
Yeah, we'll check that.
Make sure it's correct, okay?
Yeah.
If not, let
Yeah.
us know, would you?
It's the legislature. That's what I thought it meant, yes.
I would
Yes,
think so.
that's what I thought.
Legislature,
Okay.
I would think so, but...
Wouldn't want to assume we were doing something illegally.
Okay.
We good? Okay. Next on the agenda, we have bridges and tunnels, and there's one competitive procurement for a grand total of $4 million.
Motion, please.
So move.
Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Okay. New York City Transit, we have three procurements for a grand total of $2,902,850, one non-competitive and two competitive.
Okay. A motion, please. Second, please. 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 Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
We have no items for FIMTAC, and I believe that concludes the finance portion of the meeting. Jeff Rosen's here to bring us through real estate.
Thanks, Doug. So now we have some very exciting things here for Jeff to report, and he's told me that they're exciting, and I think they really are.
I'm excited.
Something we've been waiting to hear about. So go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Andrew. Let me put this in context. Back in April, I gave you a report on our plan for the office portfolio, and I promised you that I would be back to talk about other elements of our real estate portfolio. Today, I want to report to you on the important next step that we've taken in implementing our business plan with the office portfolio. I want then to give you some sense of where we stand at Grand Central and propose for you 4 new leases, including 2 that are, I think, game changers from our point of view, and we're very excited about. And I'm going to present here briefly a version of a report that I made this morning to the Railroad Committee with respect to our plans for Grand Central. Then in the fall, we will be back with reports in successive months with respect to our city properties, including particularly our master lease properties, and then the following month our suburban portfolio, at which point I believe I will have discharged my promise to Andrew that we would brief you with respect to our plans for all of our portfolio.
Except you're not going to get off that easy. Now we're going to ask you your execution strategy.
Yeah. Well, I'm on to execution. I'm on to execution now. The first item I have for your approval is a proposed contract with Cushman & Wakefield to help us to Cushman & Wakefield and subcontractors, including architects and engineers, to help us to implement the business plan that I presented to you in April. You'll recall that that plan had three fundamental elements. One, to manage our space lease portfolio aggressively. Two, to restack 2 Broadway, consolidate headquarters into that facility, and find relocation space for Metro North in Midtown and Points North, and finally, having thereby vacated this property to market this property for sale or more likely a long-term ground lease. We had 8 sort of name brand firms responded to our request for proposals for services to help us to review, refine, and implement that plan. The scope of services envisioned by the request for proposals is quite broad. It includes a full range of analytical and programming and design-related services related to the entire portfolio, not just this building or 2 Broadway. We expanded the scope to include potentially, at our option, the next steps in design to allow us to move ahead aggressively with final design, development, and construction plans for the restacking of 2 Broadway and the fitting out of the substitute space that we find for Metro North. There's a little bit of a horse and a cart issue there, because ideally we want to be able to proceed aggressively with that work, and we wanted to make sure that we had procured appropriate unit pricing to allow us to go forward with that work sooner rather than later. But at the same time, obviously the first phase of our analysis and design work will give us a better handle on precisely what the scope of our work is at 2 Broadway, and as we identify space for Metro North, we'll have a clearer idea of exactly what the fit-out work is that's required there. But having engaged a team for this exercise, we wanted to make sure that we were in a position to do it with continuity. So with your indulgence, I'm going to try to recap what's laid out in some detail in the staff summary. I'll say the staff summary is in my part of the book, but this procurement was handled through MTA procurement and in a joint effort. Basically, what we've provided, as I suggested in a previous occasion, is that we are not going to pay for these services on a fee-for-service basis, and with the exception of the sort of second phase of design and construction services, we don't have separate pricing for separate tasks. Everything that we require in order to assess our ability to consolidate into 2 Broadway and to reach the point of having entered into definitive transactions for the sale of this building and the relocation of Metro North will be included in the commissions to be earned by Cushman & Wakefield pursuant to this arrangement. Those commissions broadly fall into two categories: sales commissions or sales commissions that we would owe on a disposition of this building, whether by ground lease or outright sale, and commissions that Cushman & Wakefield would be in a position to earn through from the landlord, not from us, through the when we lease property for Metro North. And what I think we've managed to achieve here is an ability to pay for some of the services that we require, including specifically a broad range of services relating to the restacking of 2 Broadway, from other people's money. Those of you who are familiar with these sorts of transactions will know that it's typical for a landlord to pay what's called a 1.5 times commission. That is to say, a full commission based on pretty conventional rates in the industry that is determined based on the rent to be paid to the tenant's broker, and then a 50% override to the landlord's broker. What we've what Cushman & Wakefield has agreed is that they will give us the benefit of the of essentially a full elimination of half of their rate, which is to say, a third of the 150% of a full commission. So we will have the economic benefit of that either through an offset against the sales commission that we pay, or through, and this is a fairly typical practice, a kind of essentially the broker waives it, the landlord then gives us the benefit through an enhanced work letter or rent holiday or the like. Beyond that, on the sales side, which would be a commission that we would be responsible for, we have very aggressive pricing, 50 basis points on the commission up to 100 basis point up to 200 million, and 25 basis points above that. In addition, as detailed in the staff summary, the more money the broker makes from either of those two sources, there's a kind of a give back at the end. I believe it's 10% over $1 million, 20% over $2 million. Forgive me if I've got that wrong, but it's correct in the staff summary. So the upshot of this is that the better we do on the sale, the more the sort of give back kicks in, so that we end up having a nice sort of limiting factor on the amount that we're paying for these services. And as I say, the payment is contingent on transactions. The only exception to that proposition would be in the unlikely event that we, after all this time, we said, just kidding, we're not doing anything at all. They haven't made $500,000 in commissions. In that circumstance, we would owe the lesser of their out-of-pocket costs to third-party consultants, TPG, architects, and others, or the amount by which $500,000 exceeds $250,000. So, on balance, we're very happy with this deal. We had one other very competitive firm that was into this and to the end going, which was Cassidy and Turley. Cushman is actually slightly more expensive, but not in a way that we consider to be material, and we think that they're more experienced in ground lease transactions for public sector clients of this kind, which we think is it's the best team for us. So glad to take any questions. I hope that was a coherent explanation.
Jeff, they're going to consult with you on all the existing leases that we have, office space, properties. That's all going to be part of this, right?
That's right.
Because you talked about leasing new space, which I understand you, maybe some, but we're also going to be consolidating and vacating some existing space, right? Yeah. Plus moving to 2 Broadway at the same time.
Right. That's right. You'll recall that we have a number of space leases. I indicated in my report that is not our most expensive space. We average about $25 a foot for that space, and in some instances we think we need to be in those locations, but we are absolutely looking at all of those leases with the brokers with the advisors, I would call them, for the purpose of evaluating whether there are opportunities to consolidate, to renegotiate, to assign, sublet, terminate early, etc.
And the J Street property, which comes up all the time, that's part of, like you said, the city properties discussion?
Yes.
That's going to happen in
Yes, I
September?
mean, there's been quite a lot of discussion about that, quite a lot of advanced thinking. I prefer not to get into that here when I don't have all of the answers, but for purposes of this contract, it would only be included at our option because we're not in a position to assure Cushman that they would be able to earn a commission on that sale because it's the city's property fundamentally.
So, when you say suburban and city what you said in the future, September, I think you
Yeah.
said in October, there's two more pieces to this thing?
Yeah, well, we thought it would be useful to, and it's a very big portfolio, and we thought it would be useful to divide this in a way that made sense to us. The railroads have property in the city. We also have all the master lease properties for transit and a few transit properties that are not master leased. The logic of doing the properties in the city is, first of all, we have been undertaking with a group led by an assistant to Deputy Mayor Steele, including DCAS and EDC and the law department. We have been engaging in a systematic review of all our properties in the city, including master lease properties, to assess their disposition development potential. In many cases, even if they're not city-owned, the same issues come to bear: city zoning, community response. In many cases, the city has a property interest, even though it's not transit property, as, for example, in the case of some of the Long Island City properties for Long Island Railroad. So we've been looking at that as one element of the portfolio, and then the suburban properties of Metro North and Long Island Railroad are sort of in a different basket and present different sorts of issues.
So the Cushman-Wakefield contract will not deal with the city properties nor the suburban
This is
contractors?
exclusively about implementation of our office plan.
Okay.
Other questions?
Quick question. On the city properties, or where the city, there's a master lease, do you have ULURP responsibilities too?
Well, we don't have ULURP responsibilities. If we were to surrender those properties to the city and the city were to dispose of them, then they would be subject to ULURP.
But would your surrender to the city entail ULURP?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
No. Because they're already owned by the city.
Jeff, just one thing. You mentioned that Cushman was high on your list because they've had experience dealing with public entities. What would the difference be in a marketing program like this for a public entity as opposed to a private?
Well, I think the marketing in some ways is I won't say the least of it, but it's certainly not most of it. And I think in the end, it's a matter of helping us to structure the ground lease transaction in a way that works for both parties, and to sort of sell, if you will, the complexity of that deal relative to kind of a straight auction. So you have to do a lot of groundwork, I think, in advance of an RFP to make sure that everyone understands what that program is, and then in the final selection of a buyer developer, there's a great deal more that goes into the analysis and the negotiations, analogous to what we did on West Side Yards, I think, than would be the case in a straight sale.
Okay, so now, Jeff, you need a vote on the
Right.
Cushman-Wakefield contract?
That's right.
Okay, so we have a motion that's in the book, and then we have a motion, please. Second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
You got your contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good.
Now,
I think this is the beginning from my standpoint, something here we've all been working on for a long time, and we hope it really brings fruit, which I'm sure it will, and
Thank you, Andrew.
better use of our properties and consolidating it, and I think you and the team have done a really good job bringing us this far, and I'm
Thank you.
sure
Thank you.
you'll take the sense of the committee and complete this and do what we got to do to get
Absolutely.
us up to date.
Absolutely. The second thing I'd like to do is talk about Grand Central. As I say, there are four proposed leases, but I'd like to focus on Shake Shack, and Apple. Maybe before I get to those specifics, let me just put this in context a little bit. This is there's a more detailed presentation with respect to this is in the nature of an annual report that we give to the committee. This is our first year that we've been reporting to finance as opposed to the old real estate committee, but this is the report that's in your book is in a form that Nancy Marshall has been presenting for some years. This chart shows gross revenues from retail activity. Can everybody hear me? I'm facing away from the. This chart shows gross revenues in the past 3 years from retail activity, expenses, and net operating income, which is on the right. And last year, the story that we were here to tell was that we were exceptionally pleased to have maintained essentially flat revenues in a recession, in a historically bad recession, and had taken steps to reduce expenses with the help of our retail manager, Jones Lang LaSalle, so that as you can see, last year, in 2009 versus 2008, the net revenue was up appreciably. In 2010, as the economy recovered and as we were able to roll over leases and to take advantage of demand for space stimulated by the good work that Nancy and her group have been doing for many years, we were able to increase that gross revenue significantly and to continue to reduce expenses so that our NOI is now approaching $19 million from Grand Central, and I'd just like to linger on that graph and emphasize it for a minute because I think it's not to be taken for granted. But now I want to talk about what's next. Paul has given me a pointer this time, which I will use. Okay, so there are three areas that are highlighted here. This is out to Vanderbilt Avenue and Lexington Avenue, and this is the space over the Grand Central Market. This is what I'll call the east balcony, Hall B elevator lobby, and northeast balcony, and this is an area on several levels below the shuttle passage that we call Carey's Hole for historic reasons. This is hot and crusty here, and this is righted. Okay, so for as long as the terminal has been redeveloped, this east balcony has been occupied by a restaurant called Metrazur. This is space that was reclaimed from the Kodak sign when the new stair was put in. At the time of the initial leasing of the property, there was not a lot of demand for that space, frankly. It ended up getting let for significantly less than the Michael Jordans and Cipriani spaces. And Metrazur has been in there under a lease that would, but for our efforts, would not have expired until 2019. That restaurant has been profitable for its owners, but has not generated percentage rent for us. And as I say, it's generated quite low fixed rent. And moreover, this space here has been landlocked, and this hallway here has not been leased.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Was that, pardon me for interrupting.
Sure.
Was that north balcony space part of the Metrazor lease?
No, they had an option to take it, but they didn't avail themselves of it. and it's space that's been occasionally used for special events. They occasionally cater something in there, but it's not earning income for us, any appreciable income. Okay, so we have been working for some while with Metrozor to try to negotiate the terms of a conditional surrender agreement that would allow us to market the space. We finally came to terms in this spring. The upshot is the proposal that we have before you to open an Apple store in that space. Apple proposes to lease not only the entirety of this space, but another additional area for back of the house above this Hall B, and also the second basement, the lowest level of this Carey's Hole space. Carey's Hole has been occupied for the last generation or so by locker rooms and other facilities for trainmen, Metro-North personnel between shifts and so on. They are moving, as most of you probably know, next month up to a space that's been built out in the vicinity where the tennis court, one of the two tennis courts formerly was the CBS studio. And at the time that the Carey's Hole redevelopment was authorized, the expectation was it was made clear that part of the plan was for real estate to explore the commercial viability of retail in here. This space has issues with it, however, relating to access and clearances and so on. The most notable of which is that absent creation of new ADA elevator and fire stairs, none of it could be used for the intended purpose. As part of the consideration for this transaction, Apple will be building an elevator here in this area, and at its own cost, and the fire stairs, as well as doing a great deal of other utility-related work to prepare that space for occupancy. This entire proposition is as is, and Apple has a very substantial construction budget, including a good deal of what would normally be considered to be landlord work. The rent that Metrozor has been paying for this space has been $263 million a year. The rent that Apple, I'm sorry, what did I say? Oh, I'm sorry, $263 million, which just about covers our budget for the other thing. No, I'm sorry, $263,000 a year, which is some $20-something a foot. It's it's not good income, and that's how it was going to stay. The first year rent from Apple will be approximately $1.1 million, which includes some of this ancillary space, but $800,000 for the space that specifically was landlocked.
Is there some connection that's not public between the lower left space and the Metrozor space? How are they going to use that as a stockroom, which is the same, I think what you said?
This space here?
Yeah.
No, this is going to be an employee facility, and they're going to have storage upstairs in this area. This is going to be their employee break rooms, some offices, that sort of thing. I won't dwell on it in this committee, but there's been a very intensive effort involving MTA Police and every department, seemingly, of Metro-North in addressing a myriad of operational issues around deliveries and crowd control and the rest, which we're very pleased with. There's an opportunity here to build, and Apple is improving at its cost, access for deliveries and the like here off of Depew Place, which has not been open to this point.
Jeff, so how much is Apple paying per square foot, and how did you arrive at the $5 million buyout with Metrozor?
It's a lot of arm wrestling. Would have liked to have paid less. It was ultimately a question of what was possible after a certain amount of staring and impasse and walking away and walking back and so on. The Apple rent per square foot is a little bit hard to calculate because there are a bunch of elements that go into it. But our conservative, I think, estimate of what they're paying when you take into account the Metrazor payment, as you must, which is being made by Apple, and some of the work that they're doing for us that is allowing us to do better on our pro forma than we otherwise would on the ancillary space is north of $160 a foot. It's about half that. Yeah, but you can't take it out. I mean, that's what a tenant has to pay. No, it's not what we're getting. But we would be getting, if we the status quo. The status quo is what matters. So I think the question is a fair one. I think there are two separate considerations. One is what's this space worth to a tenant, and the other is what's a good deal for us. And I think this passes muster on both counts. I will say that this space was identified as restaurant space initially, in part because people supposed that would make for a nice ambience, which has certainly been the case, but also because it presents very severe limitations for retail purposes. It's not on the street. It's open. We've imposed very severe restrictions on fixturing and the like. We threw this open to a bona fide RFP process afterwards, circulated the opportunity, advertised in the Wall Street Journal and Cranes and the like, and when all was said and done, nobody else stepped up to take this on. And I think it's fair to say that that's attributable to the fact that the upfront payment is not something a retailer is looking to do, and that the construction risk that Apple is prepared to take is very significant, and so on. Okay. So if there are no other questions, I guess I'd like a vote on that, please.
Motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. Then the next thing is Shake Shack. This is another really old-looking group.
So wait a minute.
So,
He said that already. Yeah.
well, I was thinking maybe things would change with it. So, I'm not using all the jokes, Mitch. I just use it's just.
I think we've been very complimentary to you, like on the other stuff. Come on.
Hey, yeah, I'm pretty old too, but I've eaten at Shake Shack. We have I think a successful dining concourse. It's very important to us that we continually refresh and update there. And I think the opportunity to introduce a Shake Shack at that location is an exceptionally exciting one. Zocalo. Their lease is up. They bid, but they were the low bidder. Now, I will say that, as you can see in the staff summary, that Shake Shack was not the high bidder for this space in terms of minimum rent. I think to some extent that reflects the idiosyncrasies of our bidding process. I mean, I think if we had been in a negotiation with them, we could have gotten to a different place. But the selection committee that looked at this was unanimous in its determination that what we call the B score, that is the potential to attract customers for the rest of the terminal and to benefit our bottom line indirectly, in and of itself justified going with Shake Shack. And then I will say beyond that I have personal confidence that although we did not account for percentage rent at all in our scoring because of sort of the way our scoring for percentage rent works as a technical matter, that we are privy to sales information for Shake Shack that is otherwise proprietary, and that based on their experience at other locations, I'm very confident that we will be well into percentage rent here. We have, interestingly enough, I mean, I think our biggest concern about Shake Shack is crowd control, and which is a discussion we've also had with Apple. Those of you who can envision the Zocalo space will be aware that it backs up on the Oyster Bar ramp. And what we've gotten Shake Shack to agree is that their queue will begin inside the space, not outside, where it would have a potential to interfere with the other businesses or with east side access when it comes. And then as necessary, the queue will go out that little archway door. There's one at Junior's and there's one at Zocalo, and then up the ramp where we'll have an opportunity to do crowd control. And Shake Shack will be committing to man that line as necessary with the appropriate personnel.
Jeff, I'm not giving a quality judgment on either of these two leases that you just brought up. I understand the need to maximize revenue and all that, but if you take this to some conclusion, you could probably replace every existing tenant in Grand Central with national chains because they have the ability to pay more. Is that the direction are we going, or do we want some individualized, smaller, lesser-known retailers?
Well, I think we're looking for an appropriate mix, Andrew. And if you look at the other items that I brought to you today, like Poissonnier and Spices and Teas are not household names. They're very high-quality, quirky operations that are going into the market. We've continued to seek out-of-the-ordinary tenants for Lexington Passage and Gray Bar Passage. In the dining concourse generally, we're not looking for quote-unquote national chains. I think it's true that Shake Shack has several outlets, but we think that they're qualitatively and quantitatively different from the sorts of chains that are ubiquitous, and they're committed to a level of quality. It's a Danny Meyer operation. If you look at their cost of goods sold as a percentage relative to some of the other things that
have they
you
agreed?
can imagine, it's very it's a different kind of an operation.
Sure. Everyone I've seen has had incredible lines stretching around. So aside from where their line originates, where the line ends, they have agreed to say not have their people in front of the next store or another person's.
Well, as I say, I think we have an opportunity to put several people abreast up the Oyster Bar ramp, and yes, I mean when all is said and done, the last word in these matters resides with the MTA police.
Thanks.
So
Okay.
now what do we need? We need votes on what things?
Well, I guess I would ask now for approval of the 4 Grand Central items as well as the 5th, which is a minor matter to do with a bridge in Scarsdale for Metro North, and then I wanted to and Famous Familia. This is simply. I think I mentioned the last time when I brought you the lease with Famous Familia for the large space at Roosevelt Avenue. This is the outlying property. We're very pleased to have a synergistic arrangement there, and I'd ask for your approval of that one too. They are, again, that one's straightforward. They're the high bidder. They're a strong tenant. So if we can do those items, then I'll just explain the last one.
Okay, second? All in favor? Opposed?
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I just wanted to add that Pat Foy and I are very supportive of these efforts, and as we raised at the Commuter Rail Committee this morning in relation to the relationship between these issues and the Penn Station issue, Jeff has agreed to consider a substantial review and hopeful improvements in the retail mix, obviously, at Penn Station because of the diametrically opposed relationship the retail and the commuter rail situation have based upon ownership, based upon space, based upon a variety of things, but we've agreed that we're going to substantially review the Penn Station situation and try to make substantial improvements there also.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, the last item is just it's item H on here is an all agency item. Just very briefly, we're requesting some leeway in connection with revocable licenses to play and experiment a little bit. Our process is to some extent cumbersome. By the time we get through doing an RFP and coming to the board and all the rest, it has a way of eating up months and months. And what we want to do in advance of bringing you long-term revenue-generating proposals is to see whether we can't innovate to some extent. I'm talking about subway entrances where token booths were. I'm talking about parking lots at suburban train stations during the summer. Gourmet food trucks, pop-up retail, and so on. We want to kind of try to let I don't promise 1,000 flowers, but as many as possible bloom, and then see what works.
The only thing is, Jeff, I think that these kind of things, as far as I'm concerned, the operating committee, the railroad committee, should be very much apprised of what you're doing with these things, because this is a fiduciary responsibility. I really don't think the finance committee has to get involved, but certainly Jim and Mitch's committee should watch this. Is this something you guys are in favor of, or both Jim and Mitch? Because this is really an operating thing, and you just don't want it to get out of control. That's all.
I think you have to find a balance, and that's the conversation we've had. We have to find a balance between the needs of the commuters and the retail needs, and I think as Jeff and the group comes up with different ideas, they'll run it by the operating committee, and we'll go from there. I don't want to use it as a yes or no, but to get our input as to what is appropriate.
It should be, Jeff, so it's clear. I mean, I hope everybody feels the same way, that the operating committees really are apprised of this thing, and before you do anything major, that committee, the rail committee, knows about
I think
this.
I think that's the bottom line, Andrew. Is we're not talking about doing anything major. I think we're talking about small steps with consultation.
Keep them informed of what you're doing. I think
Absolutely.
that's really important. Okay?
Sounds right.
Is that acceptable to everybody?
Andy, just one thing. This simply says to enter into pilot program agreements. Doesn't tell you what kind of agreements, where they are, how they'll be.
Well, I think it says license agreements that are for an operating period of no longer than 15 months, and that revocable on not more than 60 days notice.
All I'm trying to say is at some point you ought to flush that out as to what it means. Does it mean pilot agreements, license, revocable licenses, for what? For how? For when?
Well,
that's the point that I think
for
that
customer
their committee
amenities.
has to
Okay.
watch this and work with Jeff.
Make.
Frankly, I have confidence in working with Jeff that they're not going to do anything crazy, and I think it's Jeff's, very responsible. But I do think you got to keep them informed.
Okay. Well,
I
thank
agree
you.
with Charlie.
I appreciate this, and we'll proceed cautiously. And with due consultation. I think there's a trend toward pop-ups in retail generally, and these things tend to happen a little more spontaneously than things happen around here generally, and that's the impetus for this.
Okay, we said enough. Anything else?
Thanks. No, that's it.
All right, thanks. I think
Thank
that was
you.
a good report.
Thank you very much.
Do we need a motion to approve that, or don't?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I
Okay.
think
Thanks very much.
All right. Now we go into executive session. Okay. We need a motion, please, to go into executive session. A second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.